So in our last video, we talked about reworking anything we need to with our lettering and adding it into a compact shape. So when I talked to you about that, I used a diamond for my first example. And let me get a piece of paper under that. And I talked about how I chose a diamond for this first example because of the height of the B and the low parts on the M and the T's. And after I tried this design, I wasn't really thrilled with it, so I went on and I retraced my letters from my original sketch. And for my second one, I decided to try an oval. And I added some extra parts to the sides of my lettering. Sometimes in graffiti art, even though they're not attached to the letter, these extra parts are kind of considered as serifs. And as we know, in normal type allography, serifs are those little extra parts that are attached at the beginning or ends of the strokes of the letters. But sometimes in graffiti they consider these to be serifs also. So for lack of a better term, that's how we'll refer to them. And since I was trying to fill up an oval compact design, I still had a lot of space above and below here, and I chose to use some arrows to help fill in that space. And it also helped create some movement within my design, in that my eye would not only want to read my name, but it would want to follow the arrows back around from beginning to end of my name. So I like the idea of the arrows. I like the idea of the movement they created, but I still wasn't exactly 100% sold on the oval design. So as I showed you in class, I created one using a triangular compact shape. And I added some serifs near some letters. And I really just decided to have some fun with the arrows. And this time, instead of curving, I decided to go with some zigzaggy lines connected to the arrows. And again, it just creates a little bit of fun and movement, and this ended up being the design I liked. So I point this out to you because this is why artists create sketches, is sometimes our first thought and idea is the one we go with. It's the one we like the best. But sometimes it's not always the best or ends up being the favorite. So that's why we try different things. So if I hadn't tried the oval design because I didn't like the shape of the diamond and added those arrows, then that wouldn't have sparked the idea to play around with not only another compact form that allowed for the height of the B near the middle of my design and the lower parts coming around the bottom, and it sparked the idea, well, instead of a diamond, what about just a triangle? But because I like the arrows so much from that second design, it gave me something now to play with, and I ended up liking this design the best. So as we talked about, once I have my design, then the next step is to trace over the back. So I simply took my parchment paper, laid it down, and I do recommend you keep a piece of paper underneath there while you do this. It not only helps you see your design better, but any graphite that is on this front side will not then mark up the table. And I traced over my letters with my pencil. And once I had that, then I took a new sheet of drawing paper and I lined up my design near the center of that drawing paper. And I traced over it. And I did recommend that you use pen when doing this tracing part. So then that way, if you have to stop for the day, you know what you've traced over and what you haven't. I also recommended that you put at least one small piece of tape to secure your design to the piece of paper. So again, if you have to clean up before you finish, you don't have to try to line it back up the next day. So what that does is the graphite on the back combined with the pressure we're putting on the front with the pen is going to cause any of the dusty parts of the graphite underneath here to stick to the surface of our drawing paper. And that's exactly what mine has done here. So if I carefully remove my parchment paper, you can see I have a nice light outline of my graffiti letters. And I'm going to keep these light because I'm still in the sketching stage. So the next part of our graffiti design is to add some three-dimensional quality to the lettering. And we're going to do that using what is called one-point perspective. So I'm going to raise my camera up here so I can get a little bit more of my paper showing. Okay, so I've raised my camera up a little bit. And one-point perspective is a drawing technique that artists use to show objects moving away from us. It gives the illusion that we see in actual real life. It gives the illusion that as objects move away, they look smaller. And one-point perspective uses the idea that you have a point in space in which all the parts that are moving away from us are going to eventually appear to converge at. So it just helps us give a little bit more realistic look to that three-dimensional depth. So what I'm going to do is at the very bottom of my paper, and I'm going to try to go for about the center of my design, I'm going to put a small little mark down here. And this is what we're going to call our vanishing point. So anything I try to make 3D on my lettering is going to connect to this vanishing point. Once I have my vanishing point established, then I'm going to use a ruler or a T-square, sorry, not a T-square, or a triangle, and I'm going to connect parts of my letters to this vanishing point. Now, what I want to start with is the very bottoms of the letters because they're closer to this vanishing point, and I'm not going to worry about anything above that so far. Now, when judging what's connecting, if I take a corner of my letter, like this corner of this M, and line up my straight edge from it to the vanishing point, if it is an open space, then it is something I'm going to connect back, and I'm just going to lightly extend a line towards that vanishing point, and I'm going to check every corner at the bottom of my letters, and if it's an open space, I'm going to connect that back to that vanishing point. And again, I'm only going to go so far back. Where my S and my M connect, that's helping to identify part of the bottom of my letter S. So I will check it. And I'm going to lightly go through my arrow. So anywhere my letters may connect to something, I will check those areas. If you have a letter like an S that does not have something connected to it and you have a round curve, what you would do is connect the furthest out point of that round curve. So if my S was completed here, I would check the very furthest round point of it to see if it is visible to the vanishing point. Now the corner of my B is cut off, so I'm going to imagine where it is at. And it gets kind of hidden behind the other letters here. So I'm not going to connect it. So I can erase that little light sketching I did there. I'll check where my B and my A connect. Again, the A is blocking my view here, so I'm not going to connect that part. And when I check the bottom of the A here, it does have some open areas. And again, I'm ignoring the extras I just added, my arrows and so forth. I'm just concentrating on my letters. So even though these parts I'm lightly drawing through my arrows, right now I'm considering that open space. I want to just concentrate on making parts of my letters look 3D. So the A has a partial open space here, and then it's blocked by the N. So I am going to extend it down until it hits the N, and then I'm going to pick up where my N corner starts and extend those pieces down. And again, keep this nice and light. So again, part of my T gets cut off by the N, so I will stop when I hit the letter N. And once I finish the very bottoms, then I'm going to move up a level. I'm going to check the inner parts of my letters. So like where my M points up in, the peak that points down in my letter M, I'm going to extend it out some. Check this peak. It's hidden by the letter M itself. I'll check this inside hole here where the M and the S touch. So it's going to get a little bit of a line in there. I'll check the top parts of my S. And again, if it runs into another part of either itself or other letters, then I will just stop at those letters. So I'll check the inner parts of the holes in the B. And here's an example where I'd check the outer curve of my B. Check the inner parts of the A. And the inner parts of the R. So that one lines up with a line I already drew for the outer part of the hole of the R, so I'm not going to connect that. Where A and R touch, the bottom part of the R, again stopping where I run into other letters, where R and N touch, the outer curve of the R, the top of my E, all the corners of the E. And again, make sure that as you're doing this that you are still connected to your vanishing point. If you're not, then it's going to throw off the three-dimensional look of this. Now, since these are merged together, I'm not going to do the bottom part of that E. I will check parts of my T here. So you can already see how those lines going to that vanishing point already gives it a lot more energy. It's as if it's coming from a distance and shooting up towards the viewer. Now I am going to also do my serifs, since that is how I created them. I wanted them to be kind of part of the letters. So I am going to come in and add any corners of what I am considering a serif to that vanishing point. So that would be this triangle I made on my M, the triangle I made on my B, make sure I'm at the right part. And the triangle over here at the end of my T. So now that I have these lines going towards my vanishing point, I want to choose a thickness for my letters. How thick do I want these letters to look? And I just noticed I forgot the top of my M. There we go. That looks better. So thickness is going to be how far back towards this vanishing point am I going to make the letters look? What kind of thick block am I going for? So when I decide that, what I want to do is now make the cutoff for the thickness of the block parallel to the line that these connecting lines to the vanishing point are connected to. So these are called orthogonals. They are the diagonal lines that go back towards the vanishing point. So at the bottom of my M, this corner to here has these two orthogonals, these two diagonal lines that go to the vanishing point. And when I go to stop that movement, I want to make it as parallel to my M at the top there. So I'm just going to go in between those two diagonal lines, create the thickness of my M, and that will make that bottom part of my M now look three-dimensional. So from this corner up to the S, that's this orthogonal to this orthogonal, I'm going to, as best as I can, copy my shape. Now it has a slight curve to it, so I'm going to sketch that out, and I'm going to get rid of any arrow pieces inside that three-dimensional thickness now. So now the next one is the bottom of my S. So where this touches this orthogonal, I'm now going to connect also my S. So I'm going to try to copy the curve of my S as best as I can. And erase anything inside, because now this is part of the letter S. And now I want to be as parallel as I can to the bottom of that dot. And then extra orthogonal pieces there I can get rid of. So I'm basically taking the movements I made on the face of the letter and recreating those movements to the back of the letter to make it three-dimensional. So that's what I'm going to continue to do. Okay, so I've gone through and I've added some thickness to each of my letters. I've erased most of the little orthogonal lines that were left over. And I made some executive decisions here. Here for the thickness of my N, if I would have erased the arrow here, then it would kind of look a little odd. So I'm letting it overlap here. Same thing with the end here. I didn't want to cut it off any shorter. So what I did do was come in with a little bit of a parallel line to this part of the T. So maybe it looks like it's coming out of the letter T. I added thickness to my serifs, as I mentioned. And now I have my letters that look three-dimensional. So that is the next step here of your graffiti design, is now that you've transferred it to a new sheet of drawing paper, you're going to create your vanishing point at the bottom, somewhere near the middle of your design, and you're going to check every single corner of each of your letters where they merge together, if they merge, the very far outer round edges of rounded letters, and anything that you've added as a serif, and you're going to connect it to that one vanishing point. And when that is done, then you're going to parallel lines and the shape just as it ends in the front of the letter. And this helps then with that three-dimensional look that we want for our graffiti design.